fanatical Darwinists arrogantly believe that only Darwinists, or people who are so-called, quote, scientists who adhere to neo-Darwinian super-macro-evolution theory, that only they have a monopoly on scientific truth or fact. Darwinists believe in suppressing dissent and disagreement from people who are fence-sitters or ideas, or even old earth creationists, who maybe even are degreed biologists, physicists, chemists, botanists, or astronomers, or paleontologists. They try to purge those people from the scientific community, quote unquote, and schools and colleges, people who may disagree with them. And of course they idiotically say that they're, quote, defending science against people who make, quote, attacks on science, as if Darwinian macroevolutionary speculation and exaggeration and back-in-time conjecture and force-fitting and myth and leaps were true, observable, empirical, quote, science, which it actually isn't. Fish evolving into actual frogs, then maybe that frog gradually evolving into reptiles, then gradually that reptile sprouting wings, feathers, or fur, and becoming warm-blooded, etc., etc., and, you know, certain branching scenarios and whatnot. Those things have never been physically observed in the history of science. That type of scenario is only inferred and assumed, never actually empirically, viewably, actually observably proven. And the jumps, gaps, stasis, blanks, and problems in the fossil record don't go away simply because neo-Darwinist fanatics choose to ignore or dishonestly rationalize them away. People will believe and buy almost anything if it's sold slickly and effectively, if the nonsense is presented well, like playing up chimp smarts neurotically and desperately, while conveniently ignoring the colossal differences in anatomy, blood, deep DNA, and brain intelligence, and exaggerating things dishonestly, avoiding embarrassing facts and negatives, ignoring problematic data, and just evading the real issues, selling an inconsistent and mythical bill of goods slickly and dishonestly, and just parroting the old dronish talking points, and neurotically and pathologically seeing, quote, evolution under every crack and couch, pathetically, thinking that straw man examples such as, quote, E. coli somehow proves ape-men myths or, quote, common ancestry. Moronic equivocation is another one of Darwinist trademarks and pastimes, confusing adaptations and variations within species and families as, quote, evolution, and ignoring how mutations are harmful by nature and any, quote, good side effects of any mutation always also leads to loss of normal function of proteins and biological systems. So when pathetically touting garbage like, quote, drug-resistant bacteria, they'll forget to tell you that those bacteria are still bacteria, and that they have also suffered loss of normal and necessary functions in other ways. Empirical evidence shows that real, quote, mutations simply don't work to make new organs, new functioning limbs, or truly new families. Bacteria remain bacteria. And the same for Africans with sickle cell anemia. They still remain Africans with sickle cell anemia, despite being immune to malaria. And the same for fruit flies or mosquitoes, and the same for E. coli. And it's only assumption that these small, meager changes lead somehow to bigger macro or super macro changes and crossovers and major groups arising from other major groups in some wild hypothetical scenario. That's never empirically proven, only assumed, inferred, and it's just rank speculation because of wanting to believe it. Empirical evidence, like Mendel's laws, which can be empirically and phenomenologically demonstrated, show 1. Only those physical characteristics which are due to genetic factors are inherited. 2. Wide and numerous inheritable variations are latent within any single species. 3. No visible variation outside the combination of existing genes can occur. 4. No really, quote, new inheritable characteristics appear in any species. 5. The seat of all heredity is in the germ or seed. 6. Reshuffled code is still basically fixed. That's empirical evidence. That's not assumption. Fanatical Darwinists make wild and silly assumptions that are non-scientific, which is pure conjecture and myth. Also, there's this lie, this ignorant, drone-ish talking point that somehow the term Darwinism was invented by creationists. That's simply not true. It was actually Thomas Henry Huxley who coined the term Darwinism and Darwinist in 1860, a Darwinist himself. In a positive sense, and the term has been used in either a neutral or positive sense throughout the decades by Darwinian evolutionists themselves. Even Gould used the term in a neutral sense. But the fanatical Darwinists today would have you believe that it's a creationist invention or slur or something. It's simply not true. It was coined by Darwinists themselves. Also, another nonsense lie they spew out is that the terms micro and macro evolution were somehow creationist inventions, when that's simply not true. It was actually a Darwinist himself who coined those terms, Yuri Flipchenko, in 1927. A Darwinist himself, micro and macro evolution. You know, so here you have fanatical Darwinists whining and crying because their own terms, their own historical terms are used against them. So they have to lie now and say, oh no, creationists made up those words. And the term super macro was also coined by a Darwinist, Mark Isaac, several years ago, like in 2007, to somehow not just mosquito species forming or frog species, but to refer to the, super major crossovers and groups arising from other groups. These are all Darwinist terms originally. It's not the fault of creationists if these terms are used somehow pejoratively against them. Again, the term Darwinist is a Darwinist expression originally, an invention, referring to someone who believes in Darwinian evolution theory, that descent with modification somehow leads to bigger, major changes over time. That's why you have the expression neo-Darwinist today, used by themselves. They themselves use it. And macro and microevolution, again, Darwinists themselves came up with that idea. The micro, referring to adaptations or things that we can pretty much see. I don't even use that term, by the way, generally, because it's confusing. I use adaptations, variations, things like that. Empirical evidence shows that real, quote, mutations simply don't work to make new organs, new functioning limbs, or truly new families. Bacteria remain bacteria. And the same for fruit flies or mosquitoes, and the same for E. coli. But what else can the fanatics resort to somehow, quote, prove Darwinian speculation and myth? Fossils are full of holes and blanks, though some of the fanatics even love to deny that fact. DNA is incredibly complex and could never form by chance in any setting or context or time period, and has an unbreachable barrier even with reshuffling. So they have to desperately go to garbage like E. coli and drug-resistant bacteria, or one of my favorites, quote, new frog species. Never mind that they're still frogs. That's fanatical and pathological Darwinism for you. They sure have a time of it, don't they?